Welcome to Coached Soul, a podcast for a better you. Your host, Steve Hudgens, is a licensed professional counselor, and your co-host, Julia Canton, is a therapeutic coach. Together, they discuss various topics, providing a different perspective on life and insight that you are not alone. On a non-emergency basis, you may contact them at area code 918-280-8690 or coachsoul.com to provide them with new topics, feedback, or to request an appearance on the show. And now, here's your host, Steve Hudgens.
Welcome back to the show. Again, Julia's out, and we do miss her smiling bald head of hers. I can hear her cackling right now, so it's always great. But Cinthia, it's great to have you back on the show again. And what a great segment that we just talked about as far as the roles and so forth. I want to continue in that dialogue because I think it's important that we find happiness within. That a lot of times I believe that it can be a hardship when we displace our happiness onto our partner and expect our partner to fulfill the happiness within us. What do you think about it? You know, how do people lose their identity when they come together in a relationship?
Well, I think there are several ways that causes that to happen. And one of the first ways, if you think about with women, because women are certainly more sensitive, take things in more deeply, think on things more, and can't stop thinking on things sometimes. And we have a tendency to be a little bit more vigilant and concerned about safety and if we're going to be okay. And part of that is if our girlfriends don't like us, that's very scary for us because women are pack-oriented creatures, and men have a leader with a tribe. And so women change leadership all the time in their groups, and men don't. And so, I think some of what happens is for women, if we're trying to get all of our good feelings from how people feel about us, then we're going to end up finding ourselves performing more often than being authentic versions of ourselves, because we're trying to keep security and make sure that we're liked within our group, because it's very scary for women to be ostracized from a group.
I want to play on what you shared about men leadership, women's leadership changes all the time. And it can be challenging when you bring in a man or woman together of who leads what. But I would, if I'm a millennium today, I would say, well, aren't you a little old-fashioned, Cinthia, in your thinking?
Well, I think that people may say that. And what I remind people of, we haven't changed a lot of things that occur on the earth. We've tried to make it work for us, where we change the flow of a river, we burrow through a mountain, these types of things. But there are static things that come with male and female. And those are the things that come naturally to us. So those are the things, when I know something is natural to me, nobody had to encourage me to do it. I was doing it already. And so when we think about men and women, I'm sad that we're not allowed to champion the different genders. That makes me very sad anymore these days. That does not mean in any way that I am against people that want to transition, or people that are sure they are a man trapped in a woman's body or a woman trapped in a man's body. I think that those are very important things to take a look at. I think that it's brutal if we do it to people that are not developed yet and don't have the ability to think through things in that way. And so changing gender and deciding that someone should be or could be or would be or ought to be this when we're under the age of 21 especially is brutal. And so I think that the whole idea of gender is recognizing how wonderful that is and how well it works together if we're willing to do it. And so I remind men, all the time. I say, listen, you don't pet the cat backwards, right? So don't tease your wife, okay? I say
Right.
it doesn't work. It doesn't work. You can maybe do a teeny bit, okay, but it hurts them. There's an energy that you have that makes that teasing heavier and stronger and not as good natured as it sounded to you.
I was thinking about porcupine. There's
Yeah,
one way you want to stroke a porcupine. You don't want to go backwards. You'll get quilled every time.
that's right. And it isn't because they're mad. It's because that's how they're made.
Exactly.
I
You
remind,
know,
go ahead.
well, I was going to say that, I enjoy where you're going with this because I think there is some naturalism that needs to take place in a relationship. And when we push men out, as we have seen over the decade, of men not being in homes, it impacts children.
Mhm.
It impacts the development of who they are. And sometimes it makes the children more, in my opinion, it makes children weaker in a sense of not having the masculine quality of standing up for yourself, knowing how to lead at times. I think some women can be a good leader, but at the same time, we have to recognize if a woman wants to be in construction work, great. But
We
I
see,
think
yeah.
there's, well, I was going to say, I think there's differences that we have to recognize. A man's body can last 30 years in construction versus a woman may last maybe 15 years because of the body structure that she has. It's going to break down before a man's will.
Mhm.
And so we need to embrace who we are and look within on our own happiness and being able to say, you know what, it's okay if you think this way. It's okay if this other person thinks this way.
Well, I think that's the important point, is that why are we saying that the way somebody thinks is good or bad?
Hmm,
Now if you're their therapist, then I can say to them that kind of thinking is going to increase your depression.
right.
I can say that to them because I'm supposed to be that person. So I think it's this idea of saying, what comes natural to somebody, I wish they would celebrate that. It doesn't mean that, like, I know for me as a girl, I'm a very girly girl, but man, when I was growing up, I was a tomboy all over the place. And I'm so glad my parents let me be that. And I enjoyed doing that. And so this idea that we're giving people the a choice to change something that cannot be put back.
Mm-hmm.
Once it's done, it's done. That to me is the issue versus whether or not you are male or female. I don't think that matters. You be whatever you want to be and feel whatever you want to feel, and I think that's a lovely thing to be able to say. But when we're doing this in a manner or at an age where people cannot undo this, they don't have the choice then to go back to what they think they should have been to begin with, and that is a tragedy.
Do you think that when you think about all these different changes and you being a clinician and coach, when it comes down to the dynamics of our relationship, is it the pain of our past, the trauma of our past that stops us from growing into a healthier sense of us?
Hmm. I think there's multiple issues there, and one of them, I think that there needs to be a level of spirituality for every human, and without that, you're completely feeling your way through the dark. And so I wouldn't ever tell someone what that spirituality piece needs to look like, but we do know that all through history, from the beginning to where we are now in time, that the spirituality piece is a huge deal. And if you're your own God, you're going to struggle. And so it doesn't mean that you have to follow a specific dogma or religion or something, but there has to be this idea for yourself that there's something bigger out there than just you, and that there's something out there that you can ask questions of and depend on, and wait to hear back from that, whatever that entity or whatever you call it, that's part of the default that we're having in our society, is that nothing is sacred anymore. And that's frightening.
And that's the same way I feel about relationships, families. There needs to be a safety net somewhere, so that as an individual, when I come back home to my nuclei of my family, I can feel safe. And it help for a man to know who he is, can create that safety within the family and the healthiness of the development of the children, and for him to sacrifice his needs to serve his wife. Guys, it is okay to fix a dinner. That doesn't mean you're feminine. It's okay to wash the dishes. It's okay for her to mow the grass. Whatever works for you is what's healthy.
I think it's just more about, why are we putting constructs on these behaviors instead of saying, hey, why aren't we working together to make our lives work? So if that means you do it better than I do, then why would I have to compete with you on that? So if my husband's a better cook, which he is, I'm telling you, nobody wants me to cook. Okay. And so he is. Well, I'm thankful that he actually likes to do it, because otherwise I would probably eat the same thing every day and never change.
Right.
And so I think it's this, I'm sad that we have to limit things in the way that we are limiting them. Like, somehow, if we're saying this is how men are in general, that then we have to somehow champion all the men that are not that way. Where it doesn't mean that if I'm saying, hey, in general, this is how men work, that doesn't mean that there isn't another whole class of men that may not work that way, and how beautiful that is. But to say it has to be an either or all the time, that's what creates that tension and that friction, that nobody feels like they can be anything that they are supposed to be.
Totally in agreement. Because when I think about, as a faith-based person, it talks about the church being different body parts, and we need all the body parts to work together.
That's right.
And it's learning, how do I accept our differences of opinion? And I look back in history. We talked about this in one of the podcasts about the sun and the moon, or the moon specifically. We can disagree that the moon is made out of rock and cheese all day long, and we're not going to get anywhere because we're trying to prove a point.
Right.
But if we can come together and look at similarities of our experiences, there's so much more to agree on about the shape, the color, and the size of that moon based upon what we've experienced. And it's just accepting who we are as a person and stay in our lane.
Right.
And I think it's so important for the vitality of a relationship, of being able to grow healthy, that it's okay to encourage one another, that it's okay to have differences of opinion. It doesn't mean that you're wrong.
No, it just means you have to have respect.
Right. And defining respect is a challenge nowadays, because, well, you didn't just you just ditched me. You're not respecting me, so I'm going to pay you back in revenge, and go back and forth. And that's not helping.
And I think, this is a great point. And I try to tell this to my clients. I say, if you want to be respected, then be respectable. It's that simple. If you're a respectable person, you're not going to have a lot of problems with people, because you're not going to try to convince them that they're wrong. It doesn't matter. If you just want to get along with somebody, we could get along with anybody, even if they completely disagree with us. Now, that's different than for you and I, who are clinicians, that if I say, hey, you have to have some agreement in order to be married. Otherwise, your marriage is going to fall apart. So you need to have areas that, yeah, we believe the same thing in this way. We adhere to this. We like this construct that we've made. Here's what we are able to just kind of say, it's a free for all. We don't care. But these particular things, it's the lane lines in the road. It's the stoplights at the intersection.
So going back to what we were talking about too, in regards to this little child, is understanding that little child. But when you bring them into this relationship, what would you give as far as advice to couples who are trying to figure out their identity, their place within their relationship, as to how do I know this other person, my partner, is in their childlike status or they're operating from a hurt so that I can turn off my selfish need of a child and not be so reactive.
I think you just explained it well. Yeah. I
So,
think it's the willingness.
mm,
We've lost that beautiful quality of humility, which is sad to me. And it's that humility or that ability to be humble and say, I'm interested in what you're saying, even though I'm not sure I'm going to like it. But I'm interested because it's coming from you and I want to know you.
you mean having humility doesn't make your identity? It doesn't lose your identity when you're humble?
No, and causes your identity to be stronger.
Yes, totally agree.
So
And
many.
our society can be so much better in how we can come together to build and not take the rocks and throw at each other, because we're wasting our rocks when bridges can be built out of the rocks that are thrown.
Mhm.
And when we come down to a male and a female relationship, it's understanding that the dynamics of who we are within that construct of that situation.
Mhm.
When I heard you earlier in one of the last podcasts or this one about women and how they need to be gentle with men. That's what I was receiving. What does that mean for a woman to, does that mean that she can't be strong? Does she lose her identity of strength when she serves her man?
No, I think the idea is, see, if I'm strong enough to be humble with my husband, okay, that means that I'm willing to accept the fact that I might be wrong. That's what humility is. Humility says, okay, that's on me. That's on me. I thought I was right. Now I'm seeing there's more information. That's on me. I need to readjust and re-present it to you. And so it's like this idea with women. I say to women all the time, and maybe the women listening are going to hang up at this point, I don't know, but I say to women, you do not understand that women rule the world. You don't really get it. And
Mm,
see, they come from it as, well, if women really ruled the world, we wouldn't be beaten up all the time. We wouldn't be, like shut out from a particular business or this. And I say to them, you have to understand that men don't have as many opportunities to be different than women do. We can be we have all kinds of facets about us that we can be talking out of or living out of. Men have one, and this is what they do. They hold the line. That's what they do. And so we, on the other hand, are very malleable. We are very flexible. We can change hats all the time. We can change friends. We can change all over the place. So I like to remind women that if we really understood how valuable we are to men, and I don't even mean just straight men. I know gay men. I've treated gay men. I love men. And gay men love women. Okay? They
mhm.
do. And that's one of the fascinating things about women, is that there's a quality about women when they laugh, when they giggle, when they push their hair back, when they cry, when they tear up, when they start to lose it and fall apart. It's just a phenomenal creature that has been created. Now, I think men are absolutely fabulous as well, but they kind of have one tool in the toolbox. Okay. And we have about 50. I say to women, have you seen a woman come with her makeup bag if they're going to do a girls' night? It's like, yeah, we got everything we need. I say every woman has a handbag. We bring everything that we could possibly think that we could need. A guy brings a wallet. That's it. He doesn't worry about all the stuff that he might need. He just knows he'll take care of it if he'll figure it out.
It's almost like I'm getting a complex that men are boring because we got one tool to mess with. you know,
No, you
but
have to.
I know that's not what you're saying.
But
And
men,
it's
yeah, and men, I'll think about it. Men have they're always visionaries. Now, that doesn't mean women aren't, because I'm very much a visionary person.
sure.
But men like the vision piece that they like to do in their life of how they want the world to be.
The thing about it is that if we allow ourselves to stay in our lane and being able to respect our lanes, there's so much that men and women can do together and build successful businesses, build successful families, building you're right. And it's like women's brains are like noodles. You're touching every little piece. It just blows me away of squirrels that y'all chase. But men, we have those do nothing box, and you guys, it drives you nuts because how can you not sit and think about nothing? But at the same right. But at the same time, you're right. Men are visionaries. Women can be too. But at the same time, I think that's the balance that we can bring for one another.
Well, and I think it's important for women to recognize that if they're feeling like they're in a one down position to a man, that usually means that man is very insecure.
Oh, totally agree.
And
yes.
So women miss that piece because they're wanting to think that if they were respected and wanted and loved and desired, then everything would be happy and everything would go well for them all the time. And I remind them, I say, have you looked at the royal family? Has not gone well for those women.
No, it hasn't.
So it's not about having some big, honor and big position. It's about understanding the world is struggling right now really badly.
And that's the whole reason behind Coached Soul, the podcast, so that we can have vulnerable conversations that we can draw out for people to let them know that counseling is not taboo,
right?
That coaching is not taboo. Me as a therapist, I needed a therapist in the past. We're all human beings faced with emotions and a plethora of things in our past that make up who we are. That doesn't mean that defines who we are. We define who we are. Mm-hmm. But it's finding that inner strength to give your inner child permission to cry, to give it permission to be, but to manage it as well. And so I think about all of this encompassing what we talked about, and it's such a great topic that we could go on and on and on about. But, for the sake of time, it's important that we are able to find that the differences of men and women is okay. Mm-hmm. And behind every good man is a good woman.
And we're all human. And so we have similarities, but we do have these polar, places in us that say, hey, I'm either this or I'm that. That doesn't mean that I don't do male things. It doesn't mean that I don't take on men. I take on men every day. And because I understand men, they love it and take it, and they're thankful for it.
If men can start working on not being so reactive and be like, I hear this all the time. We want you to be a rip at Yellowstone. It's like, okay, I hear all the time, women, why can't my husband be like Rip on Yellowstone? We got to come back to reality. Yes. That is a TV show. The books that we read, things like that, I think sometimes we build up in our mind the perfect person.
Right.
And when we have those type of expectations, we're going to fail. We're going to hurt ourselves all the time because our expectations are not being met. But if we can come to an understanding that we're imperfect, that we can accept one another in our being of who we are, and just why can't we come along to work with one another?
Right.
And encourage and uplift and have good conversations like we're having here, and identifying what our roles are, who we are as an individual. And when people, I ask people, who do you say you are, without putting the constructs of that person, what everybody labels you to be. And for me, when people ask me, I am always a son of God, meaning that I'm a child of God first. Mm-hmm. That I try to be able to, I know I'm not perfect, but I know whose I am and where I'm going. and being able to treat people with respect because I respect myself, and then I love who I am because he loved me first.
That's right.
So we are grateful for this time, Cinthia. Thank you so much for taking the time. I look forward to many more conversations in the future with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope to have you back next week. Until then, be safe and be kind.